I played hide and seek with my brother when I was a child. It was one of our favorite games to play. But when my mom told us that we weren't allowed to play it anymore because of what happened the last time we played, I got really upset. I begged her to let me tell her what happened, but she just shook her head and walked away. My brother and I exchanged glances. We both knew that if Mom found out what we did, we were going to be in trouble. So we kept quiet and agreed to never speak of the incident again. But now, more than 20 years later, I can't stop thinking about what we did all those years ago. And it seems like my nightmares are becoming reality. It was on an ordinary day in 1995 when my brother and I decided to play a game of hide and seek. The only rule was that we had to count to 100 before we could start looking for each other. This was important because otherwise we wouldn't have enough time to find each other before sunset. Back then, we lived in a small town, and every day after school, we would come home, eat some snacks, and go outside to play until our mom called us inside for dinner. The problem was that we didn't know where to play. Our front yard was too small, and the park was all the way at the end of the street. But then my brother suggested that we should play hide and seek at the old cemetery at the edge of town. The cemetery wasn't that old, but it looked creepy because most of the trees surrounding it had died and the iron fence had rusted over time. Although it seemed like a fun idea at first, I soon regretted my decision to listen to him. There were so many gravestones that I felt like we were being watched by the spirits of the dead people buried underneath them. I remember hugging my knees to my chest while hiding behind a large stone cross. That's when I heard some footsteps near me. I think I was so scared that I started screaming even though I don't remember saying a word. Anyway, I ran away from the sound and hid in an even darker place between some old oak trees. I don't know how long I stayed there, but I can still remember how cold the ground felt on my cheek. Then suddenly I heard a voice calling my name. I jumped in surprise and looked around me to try to figure out where the voice came from, but I couldn't see anyone. Thinking that it was my imagination, I continued playing until I heard my mom's voice calling for me and my brother. When I came out from my hiding spot, I saw that my brother was already there with Mom. They both looked worried. Mom asked me if I had seen my brother earlier, but I lied and said no. Even though I had heard footsteps, I didn't want to tell Mom where I had been. I was sure that she would get angry and punish me. After that incident, my mom never let us play hide and seek ever again. Every time I asked her why, she just gave me a sad smile and said, "Some places are off limits." Of course, I wanted to know where these off-limit places were, but Mom always changed the subject whenever I asked her. As the years went by, I tried to forget about the game and the cemetery. But every time I passed by, I couldn't help but wonder why my mom reacted the way she did. Was it because she thought that playing there was disrespectful to the dead people? Maybe, but I think there was something else that she didn't want to tell me. One day, I decided that I wanted to know the truth once and for all. So I went to my mom and asked her why she didn't want us to play hide and seek anymore. She sighed deeply and looked down at her feet, but I kept asking her until she finally spoke up. "That place holds a lot of pain and sorrow," she said, her voice trembling. "People have lost their lives there and many families have suffered. It's not a place for children to play." I wanted to ask her what exactly she meant by this, but before I could say anything, Dad interrupted and told me that it was time to go to the store. I knew that he was trying to protect me, but I felt like they were only making things worse by not telling me the truth. When they left the room, I decided to check the attic. In the old wooden chest that used to belong to my dad, I found an old photo album. I opened it and saw a picture of my parents standing next to a headstone at the cemetery. On the back of the photo, I could read the name and date of birth and death of the person who was buried there. It was a girl, and judging from the clothes in the picture, she had died in the late 80s. I showed the photo to my brother, And we realized that the girl in the picture must have been my dad's little sister. At that moment, I understood why my mom had forbidden us from playing at the cemetery, but I still had so many questions. Why had her sister died? How had she died? And was there any connection between her death and her family? I decided to ask Dad directly, but I could tell from his facial expression that he didn't want to talk about it. He told me that I was too young to understand, but I didn't believe him. I was 13 years old, and I was sure that I could handle the truth. One night, when everyone was asleep, I took out my laptop and started searching for my aunt's name on the internet. I also wrote down the name and year of her death on a piece of paper and went to the local library to do some research. I remember sitting at a table in the historical archives and reading through old newspaper articles about deaths and accidents. I was shocked when I found an article about my aunt's death. The headline read, "Young girl found dead in shallow grave at Cedar Hill Cemetery." I read through the whole article, but it didn't give any details about what might have happened to her. There was no information about how she died or who had killed her. The police had never found the murderer. I was so confused, but I knew that I had to keep this a secret from my family. I didn't want them to worry about me, so I deleted all the documents that I downloaded from the internet and put the newspaper article back in its place. At night, I often had bad dreams about a young girl who looked a lot like me. She was always standing right next to my bed and whispering my name. At first, I thought that it was just my imagination, but when I started finding strange symbols carved into my bedroom walls, I became terrified. I told my parents that I was afraid that someone was trying to break into our house, but they only laughed at me and said that I was imagining things. It was during one of my nightmares that I heard a voice that sounded very much like my aunt's. "Help me," she cried. "Help me and set me free." I woke up immediately and turned on the lights, but everything seemed normal. Nobody had broken into the house, and there was no sign of a struggle. However, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being watched. Whenever I looked around me, I thought I saw shadows moving in the corner of my eye, but when I turned around, I couldn't see anything. Things became even scarier when I started seeing the same symbols that I had seen carved into my bedroom walls showing up everywhere. For example, I saw them drawn on the windows at school and etched into the bark of a tree near my house. I told my friends and classmates about it, but they thought that I was crazy. According to them, I had been drawing the same symbols myself without realizing it. Although I knew that this wasn't true, I began to question my own memory. Maybe I really had been drawing the symbols without realizing it. Maybe I had made the whole story about my aunt up in my head. Maybe it was all just a figment of my imagination. But then one day, I found an old photo of my family that made me question everything. In the picture, I was standing right next to my dad's sister. She was smiling, and although I was too young to remember her, she didn't look scary to me at all. Instead, she looked like a friendly and fun-loving aunt. The thought that she had been murdered made me feel sick to my stomach. And at that moment, I was more determined than ever to get to the bottom of the mystery. I went back to the archives and studied my aunt's case files. I went through all the evidence, including the autopsy report. Finally, I found something interesting. The cause of death was listed as unknown, but there was also a note that said that traces of a certain type of poison had been found in the girl's body. The amount of poison wasn't enough to kill an adult, but for a small child, it was a lethal dose. The police suspected that the girl's parents had killed her, but since they couldn't find any evidence, they eventually gave up. I wish I could say that after I learned this, everything returned to normal, but unfortunately, that's not the case. The nightmares continued, and I could still feel the presence of someone watching me all the time. Now I am a grown woman, but even today, I can't enter a cemetery without feeling scared. And sometimes I think that the evil that's connected to this place will never leave me.